There's a moment not loud, not dramatic where you realize you're being erased in real time. Not with words, but with silence. With glances that slide past you. With doors that open for everyone else. Elias Monroe didn't walk into that conference to make a statement. He walked in to disappear, just enough to see who would notice, who would welcome him, who would turn away. But the hardest part wasn't being overlooked. It was recognizing that the very space he had built, the one that bore his values, his funding, his quiet labor, had no memory of him, or worse, chose not to. And what do? When the world forgets you in rooms you once lit from the inside? You don't yell. You stay. You watch. And when the time comes, you stand. Now, let's get started. It was the kind of morning that only Montana could deliver, crisp, clear, and unspeakably quiet. At the edge of Sequoia Resort's Grand Conference Pavilion, a luxury shuttle hissed gently to a stop. Its doors slid open with a smooth whisper, and from it stepped a man no one noticed. Elias Monroe adjusted the collar of his heather-gray turtleneck and rolled his shoulders beneath the soft corduroy jacket. The air was thinner up here. He liked that. It made people speak slower, breathe deeper. It gave the illusion of openness until it didn't. The lobby of the Sequoia Summit buzzed with the kind of polished chaos that only high-stakes tech conferences could manufacture. Designer suits, espresso foam, startup badges clipped to lanyards like military credentials. It smelled like money and anxiety. Elias walked in with no fanfare, no entourage, no badge, just a calm, practiced gait that spoke of someone used to standing in unfamiliar rooms. He wasn't here to be seen. He was here to see. The reception desk was manned by a woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. Carly Bradford. Young, capable, and deeply invested in the hierarchy she'd been handed. Her tablet blinked with check-ins. Founders, VCs, media. Everyone had a place. And people who didn't, well, they didn't. "Good morning," Elias said with a small nod. She didn't look up. "Badge?" He offered a simple printed confirmation page, creased once down the center. She glanced at it, then frowned. "This is for founders only," she said, her voice flat. "I am a founder," Elias replied, his tone even. "Of? Neurostratus." She paused, then typed, her brows knit. "There's no listing here," she said. "Maybe try the general sessions in Hall B." Hall B, where the interns and brand reps were gently herded. "I'm one of the primary funders for this event," he said, softer now. That got her attention for a second. Her gaze swept over his outfit, his shoes well worn but cared for. No designer logos, no glint of status. "I'm going to need you to step aside, sir," she said. "This area is restricted. I'll have to ask you not to hold up the line." Behind him, someone coughed impatiently. A man with salt and pepper hair and a 10-0 watch leaned forward. "Maybe this gentleman's looking for catering staff check-in," the man said, chuckling. Elias didn't flinch. He turned slightly and nodded. The man's name was Warren Slade, CEO of a venture fund with a reputation for backing shiny but unsustainable ideas. Elias knew his portfolio better than he knew his own reflection. Slade didn't recognize him. Of course he didn't. Warren slid his monogrammed leather briefcase onto the table between them. "Let's keep this area clear," he barked. The implication hung in the air like a bruise. Elias took a half-step back, not in submission, but in observation. Around them, the buzz of the conference continued, oblivious to the slow burn happening in the center of the room. He noticed the barista behind the espresso machine glance his way, then looked down. A pair of junior engineers walked past, laughing. A keynote speaker's face flickered on the large lobby screen. Innovating with integrity. And still, Carly held firm. "You're not on the list," she said. "I'm going to have to ask you to move." He offered a small nod, then turned and walked quietly toward a less crowded corner of the lobby. He wasn't surprised. Disappointed, perhaps, but not surprised. It wasn't the first time a door refused to open. It wouldn't be the last. What stung wasn't the rejection. It was the routine of it, the smooth efficiency with which power decided who was seen. He found a bench near a row of ficus trees and sat down slowly. He didn't call security, didn't make a scene. Instead, he tapped once on the inner edge of his watch. "Natalie," he said into the mic, "initiate silent protocol." Back at Neurostratus HQ in Austin, Natalie Green's fingers danced across her keyboard. "Recording activated," she replied. "And the live stream?" "Jaden's already rolling." Jaden Pierce, a rising tech YouTuber with over 4 million subscribers, had been embedded at the summit. Elias had arranged that week's AG not as insurance, but as inevitability, because this wasn't a sting. This was a mirror. The door opened again across the lobby. In walked a group of founders Elias had met during Round Table Sprite. Driven, mostly white, mostly male. They were greeted with lattes and affirmations. Elias stood quietly, watching. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was listening. To the silence. To the hierarchy built on unspoken rules. To the way Carly smiled at confidence when it came wrapped in Gucci. A cleaning cart rolled past. Its wheels squeaked slightly. Pushing it was a woman in her 60s dark skin, gray braids tied neatly back, eyes steady. She paused as she passed Elias. Didn't speak. Didn't stare. She just reached into her cart, pulled out a paper cup, and placed it gently on the bench beside him. Steam rose from it. Fresh jasmine tea. Then she walked on. That momensolent unrecorded was the only welcome Elias had received since stepping into the building his company paid for. He didn't sip the tea. Not yet. He sat still, invisible in plain sight, as the summit opened its doors. Elias remained in the corner of the lobby, the warm tea untouched beside him, cooling with every passing minute like an invitation rescinded. The foot traffic picked up as more guests arrived. Men in tailored blazers, air-kissed women in sleek pantsuits. Badges were scanned. Welcome kits exchanged. The sound of espresso shots and polite laughter filled the space like an invisible net beautiful to watch, impossible to breathe through. No one questioned his presence anymore because no one noticed him. And that was somehow worse. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had written the summit's code of conduct himself. He had built the entire platform for ethical innovation, inclusion, and integrity. And here he was, outside the ecosystem he created, treated as an afterthought, a misfile, a misfit. From behind a nearby pillar, a group of young developers whispered. "Who's that guy?" one asked. "Dunno. Maybe operations?" Their voices weren't mocking, just dismissive. The kind that cuts cleaner than cruelty. Elias glanced at his watch. Natalie had sent the first data flag from HQ. Internal facial recognition scan confirmed. Elias Monroe's ID marked as inactive by registration team. They hadn't just missed him. Someone had removed him. Carly hadn't made a mistake. She'd followed a system rigged to confirm her assumptions. Elias leaned forward, elbows on knees, and exhaled through his nose. His shoulders remained broad and straight, but inside, something bent. He was tired. Not from walking, not from waiting. From carrying this same story into every room and still being asked to prove he belonged. "Elias," Natalie said quietly into his ear, "the error wasn't clerical. Your profile was manually suspended at 7:43 a.m., 42 minutes before you arrived." He said nothing. She continued, more gently now. "It was flagged by someone logged in under the event planning vendor. It doesn't make sense. We'll find the trace." Still, he said nothing. Because what was there to say? That he'd seen this before? That after decades of overachieving, of building things bigger than himself, the world still found ways to subtract his presence? At the center of the lobby, Warren Slade was holding court with a group of investors. He was telling a story about his latest Series B round, hands moving like a conductor, voice pitched just loud enough to dominate without appearing needy. Warren looked over and locked eyes with Elias just briefly. No recognition. No flicker. Just the vague sense that the help hadn't cleared out yet. Elias stood and made his way toward the side hallway that led to the networking lounges. No one stopped him, because no one saw him. Halfway there, a staff member in a conference polo stepped into his path. "Hey, sir. I don't think this area's open yet." Elias paused. "I'm an invited executive," he said simply. The man frowned. "Can I see a badge?" Elias reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded printout again. The staffer looked at it, then up at him. "Yeah, this doesn't help. I'll need you to wait in the public zone, sir." "Of course," Elias said. He turned and walked away. His voice hadn't wavered, but his hands, tucked into his coat pockets, had started to close slowly, his fingers curling against the fabric. Behind him, the door to the executive lounge opened. A man in his 30s stepped out with a drink in hand, chatting casually on the phone. "Yeah, I just met the Neurostratus guy last month, genius. Different energy, man. Real deal." He walked right past Elias. Didn't realize he was describing the man beside him. The door closed. The silence returned. Elias took a seat on one of the hallway benches, beneath a modern art installation meant to represent vision without borders. The irony felt comical. That's when she reappeared. Mavis, the cleaning staffer. She was wiping down a row of unused chairs. Her cart was silent new wheels, well-oiled. She moved with the patience of someone who had survived rooms like this before. She glanced his way, said nothing. But when she finished her row, she walked over and placed a single folded napkin on the bench beside the cold tea she'd left earlier. It read, "Some rooms weren't built for you to be seen, only to be changed by your presence." The handwriting was smooth, deliberate. Elias didn't smile. He just nodded, like a man finally heard through silence. Inside his earpiece, Natalie's voice returned. "They just reset your access." "Who?" "Unclear. But someone at the top. You're officially back in the system. Want me to trigger visual authorization?" Elias shook his head, then remembered she couldn't see him. "No," he said. "Let it ride." "Copy." He looked down at the napkin again. "Changed by your presence." He had spent decades building bridges in industries that never wanted to cross them. He had mentored founders, funded labs, built programs. He had done it all without demanding applause. And now, once again, he was reduced to watching others walk into a space he paid for. A space that no longer recognized his face. That didn't just sting, it hollowed. Because you can't fight what people don't even admit they're doing. You can only outlast it. Elias stood slowly. He didn't feel angry. He felt clarified. He tapped his watch. "Natalie, prep the live stream feed. For the main hall? For all of it. You sure you want to go on camera?" "No. But I need to be seen." And for once, he didn't mean by the system. He meant by everyone watching from the margins, the ones who had been him, over and over again, the ones sitting outside rooms they helped build. Jaden Pierce didn't plan to make a statement that morning. He was supposed to film the opening keynote, post a few behind-the-scenes clips, and maybe get an interview with one of the mid-tier founders. Nothing controversial, nothing viral, but something about the way the man in the gray turtleneck was sitting silent. Still, unseen stopped him. Jaden recognized Elias Monroe almost immediately. He'd done a school project on Neurostratus in his undergrad days. The company had revolutionized neural pattern mapping with their open-access AI interface. Elias was a legend among tech ethicists. Not loud, not flashy, but brilliant. And now, he was being iced out of his own summit. Jaden angled his camera and whispered to his mic. "I think I just saw Elias Monroe's. The Elias Monroe get denied entry to the Sequoia Founders Lounge. No badge, no access. The man who funded this conference." He hit upload. 3 minutes later, the post hit 20. 0 views. At 5 minutes, it hit 150. 0. By minute 7, Natalie Green's console at Neurostratus HQ exploded with alerts. CNN Business. Did Sequoia Summit just block their own sponsor? TechCrunch. Viral video claims industry pioneer. Barred from event he built. NPR's Innovation Desk. We're watching. Natalie opened a secure comlink. Elias, it's happening. I know, he said. And then, calmly, as if he were ordering coffee, patch the internal feed to room A. All speakers. All stages. He walked back into the main lobby. The same staffer from before started to move toward him again, but this time paused checking his tablet. Something had changed. Mr. Monroe? He asked, suddenly respectful. Elias didn't stop, didn't acknowledge the shift. He walked past the reception desk, past the velvet ropes, and directly toward the main stage. The lobby fell quiet. Even the espresso machine hissed a little softer. On stage, the moderator had just finished introducing a panel on leadership without ego. The irony hung like a fog. Elias stepped into the aisle. No badge, no microphone, just presence. The moderator looked confused, then nervous. Behind the scenes, event staff scrambled. A coordinator's voice cracked through a headset. Is he scheduled to speak? Who let him up? Elias reached the stage and took a slow breath. The panelists froze. He looked at the microphone on the stand, then didn't touch it. Instead, he looked out at the audience, calm, still. He began speaking without amplification, but the room was so silent, every word landed like thunder. I was told this stage is reserved for founders, he said. Heads turned. I was told this lounge is for leaders. Phones began to lift. I was told by people with confidence in headsets that I did not belong here. A few people chuckled awkwardly. Most just stared. Elias stepped forward. But I helped build this room, fund this summit, mentor 3 of the panelists sitting here. The moderator's eyes widened. And still, Elias continued, I had to wait in the hallway, because someone decided I didn't look like the kind of man who belonged. No one breathed. No one moved. I came here not to speak, he said, but to observe, to see how this ecosystem I helped create would greet a stranger who did not announce himself. And it did. He paused. With silence. With suspicion. With subtle exclusion. Behind him, the stage screen flickered Natalie had patched in the live stream. The teacup. The denied badge. The whispering hallway. The napkin. Some rooms weren't built for you to be seen, only to be changed by your presence. The quote filled the screen in quiet silver letters. And for the first time that day, Elias smiled. My name, he said, is Elias Monroe, founder of Neurostratus, principal funder of the Sequoia Innovation Summit. And for those who decided that this space was not for Mellet, me assure you, it is not for you either, if your vision excludes the people who built the very foundation you stand on. The moderator stood, hesitantly offering the mic. Elias didn't take it. Instead, he turned to the audience. To those who've ever been ignored, redirected, or dismissed, know this. Your worth is not decided by someone else's comfort. It is decided by the integrity you carry into the room. Behind him, Jaden Pierce was still filming. His fingers shook slightly. He typed. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the room. The post went up. CNN cut into their morning broadcast. MSNBC followed. Even Fox Business shared a clip, albeit with the caption, Tech Founder stages surprise protest at Elite Summit. By the time Elias stepped off the stage, 1.2 million people had seen the moment. By the time he returned to the bench where Mavis had left her note, that number had doubled, and she was still there, still wiping chairs, still invisible to most. Thank you, he said to her softly. She didn't respond right away, just looked at him and said, I saw you before they did, then walked away. Backstage, the summit's executive coordinator was panicking. Emails flooded in from sponsors, press outlets, and corporate partners. Natalie Green had already received a call from the Office of Corporate Ethics. Not with a warning, but with a request for partnership. Mr. Monroe, the officer said, you've sparked something bigger than PR. People want change, not statements. Systems. Elias nodded. Then let's build them. 2 hours later, Elias convened a private roundtable with CEOs, but with junior engineers, overlooked founders, and conference staff. He listened more than he spoke. He asked what they'd seen, what they'd felt, what they feared. And when it was over, he announced the Clear Code Initiative, a new AI-integrated compliance tool that flags discriminatory behavior in hiring, event access, and vendor selection. It will run silently, he explained, but it will record everything. And if someone is denied access because of bias, whether conscious or noted, will be logged, reviewed, and corrected. No applause. Just a quiet exhale from the people in the room. Jaden Pierce live-streamed the announcement. Natalie followed with a press release. The world responded not with celebration, but with curiosity. Who was this man who didn't fight fire with fire? Who rebuilt a system that had tried to erase him? Who corrected the room, without ever needing to control it? That evening, Forbes published a headline. He didn't seize the stage, he owned the silence. The next morning, the summit looked the same. Same marble floors. Same security at the door. Same scent of citrus polish drifting up from the tiles. But something in the air had shifted. People weren't walking as fast. They weren't speaking as loud. And no 101 ignored the man in the gray turtleneck anymore. Elias arrived just after sunrise, before the badge scanners beeped their first welcome. He didn't need to be early. He chose to be. Because that was the hour when the room remembered itself. He passed Carly Bradford at the front desk. She looked up this time with panic in her throat and apology in her eyes. "Mr. Monroe," she said, standing. "Sir, too didn't know. I mean, if I had realized." "You did what the system taught you," Elias interrupted, not harshly. "But now you know better." She froze. He leaned in slightly. "Don't waste the lesson." Then he walked on. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just steady. Because Elias Monroe didn't need revenge. He already had clarity. Upstairs, in the glass-walled conference room renamed the Monroe Forum overnight, Elias convened a private meeting with the summit's leadership board. No reporters, no cameras, just truth. "Before we talk about equity," Elias began, "we need to talk about memory." The room was silent. "Because this place forgot me," he said. "Not personally, structurally. And that's the more dangerous kind of forgetting." The chairman of the board, a wiry man named Barrett Klein, adjusted his cufflinks. "We've already drafted a public apology." "This isn't about your apology," Elias replied. "It's about your practices." Barrett cleared his throat. "Well, you've certainly raised awareness." "I didn't come here to raise awareness," Elias said. "I came to raise accountability." He placed a folder on the table. Inside, the official framework for Clear Code, the compliance AI his team had finished building in stealth 6 months ago. "I've seen what happens when policy is left to goodwill," Elias said. "So I built a system that doesn't rely on mood or memory, just truth." The board members leafed through the documents, and one by one, their faces changed from polite tolerance to slow, unavoidable respect. ClearCode would run real-time audits of hiring, access logs, credential rejections, event invitations, and bias markers embedded in decision-making patterns. Every organization that adopted it would have to sign off on quarterly transparency reports made visible to the public. No hiding behind misunderstandings. No backroom apologies. No empty DEI slogans. Just measurable accountability. Barrett blinked. "You're asking us to—" "I'm not asking," Elias said. "I'm inviting you to build a future you can actually defend." He stood. "The alternative is continuing to host summits that look inclusive on the banners but biased at the badge table." Then he nodded once and left the room. The story could have ended there, It would have been enough. But Elias understood something most men in his position forget. Change isn't sustained by moments, it's sustained by systems. And so, over the next 4 days, he did something radical. He stayed. He sat on panels. He attended workshops. He ate lunch with junior designers and college interns. And when people whispered apologies or nervously thanked him, he responded not with speeches, but with questions. What would have helped you speak up earlier? What systems need to change so someone else doesn't have to do what I did? His presence wasn't disruptive. It was corrective. He wasn't there to shame people. He was there to shift gravity. On the 3rd day, Jaden Pierce caught him alone near a coffee stand. "Mr. Monroe," he said, "can I ask you something?" Elias turned. "Of course." "Why didn't you fire anyone?" Elias smiled, just a little. "You think consequences always come with pink slips?" Jaden shrugged. "I mean, that's how it works, right?" "No," Elias said. "That's how it ends when people want noise, not change." He paused. "You don't change culture by chopping off heads. You change it by showing people who they are when they're not pretending." Jaden was quiet for a moment, then asked, "So what happens now?" Elias took a sip of his coffee. "You keep filming." Behind the scenes, Natalie Green had begun onboarding 5 new companies to pilot ClearCode. 2 major conferences reached out, requesting integration, and 4 of the summit's corporate sponsors privately offered to fund a multi-year expansion initiative. Not because of guilt, because of pressure. Because the public wasn't just watching, they were demanding receipts. Barrett Klein called Elias the following evening. "I spoke with our legal team. We're on board. Full adoption of ClearCode by Q3. And your partners? They'll follow." "They'd better." Barrett exhaled. "You didn't just change the conversation, Elias. You rewrote the script." Elias didn't respond immediately. Then, in a quiet voice, "No, I just reminded the room who wrote the first draft." That night, Mavis found him sitting alone near the west exit, where the glass wall looked out over the pine-lined valley below. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside him. "I hear they're changing the name of the ballroom next year," she said, "calling it the Monroe Hall." Elias looked over. "Wasn't my idea." She smiled. "Of course it wasn't." They sat there a while in the kind of silence that doesn't hurt, just settles. "You did good, baby," she said finally. Elias didn't respond, but his shoulders softened. That was enough. At the closing ceremony, Elias didn't take the main stage. He stood off to the side, behind a curtain, watching as young founders presented ideas not yet diluted by funding decks and ego. And when one of Thema's soft-spoken woman named Eileen from Ohio shared a project using ClearCode to track bias in public housing approvals, Elias finally allowed himself a moment of something rare. Pride, not in himself, but in what could grow from ground that once refused to hold his name. As the applause echoed, he turned and walked away quietly. No spotlight, no selfie, no victory lap, just quiet dignity. And the echo of a line Mavis had once written. "Some rooms weren't built for you to be seen, only to be changed by your presence." 1 week after the summit ended, a new plaque was installed outside the main ballroom at Sequoia Resort. It was small, no lights, no marble border. Just brushed steel, cool to the touch, engraved with 6 words, "The Monroe Hall built with presence." There was no unveiling ceremony, no speeches, no ribbon to cut. It just appeared and stayed. In Austin, at the Neurostratus headquarters, Elias stood at the edge of the company's Open Innovation Lab, watching a group of interns present the first test results from a new AI auditing tool integrated with ClearCode. The room buzzed with the kind of optimism only untested systems could generate. They weren't jaded yet. They believed in change not as a concept, but as a choice. Elias stayed at the edge. He didn't need to dominate the room. He just needed to know it could thrive without him. Afterward, Natalie Green joined him near the glass wall overlooking the downtown skyline. ClearCode's adoption rate crossed 41% this morning, she said. He raised an eyebrow. That includes 2 federal agencies and 3 major universities, she added. He nodded. Good. And the Equity Collective wants to meet about a partnership. He turned to her. Let's make them wait. Natalie smiled. Absolutely. Then her voice softened. You know, you could have walked away. After everything. Let the press write the story and move on. Elias looked out at the street below. Stories fade. She waited. Systems don't, he said. The next month, Elias formally launched the Monroe Elevation Fund, a $25 million philanthropic initiative focused on supporting underrepresented tech founders and engineers through mentorship, access to capital, and equity-first education. The application portal didn't require a degree, didn't require a pitch deck, didn't ask for a video introduction. Just 3 questions. What did you build? Who did it serve? And who tried to convince you it wasn't enough? Within 48 hours, over 12, 0 submissions poured in. One came from a teenager in rural Georgia who had reverse-engineered a satellite signal booster to help her town get internet access. Another from a janitor in New Jersey who built a code-free AI model to detect water contamination in his neighborhood. Another from a former inmate in Texas who had trained himself in cybersecurity using discarded manuals and public library Wi-Fi. Elias read every single one, not because he didn't trust his team, but because he still remembered what it felt like to be unseen. Then came the letter. Handwritten. No return address. The ink had bled slightly from the envelope's journey. Inside, it read, Mr. Monroe, 10 years ago, I submitted a racial bias complaint against a senior official at a major airline. The report disappeared. I was told it was misfiled. I didn't fight it. Last week, I saw your story, and I found my voice again. Thank you for standing. It reminded me I still could. A retired pilot, now finally at peace. Elias folded the letter slowly and placed it inside a small wooden box in his study. The box wasn't for awards or press clippings. It was for truth. Quiet truth. The kind you carry without parade. The media called it the Monroe Effect. Forbes ran a headline. From ignored to iconic, Elias Monroe quietly rewrites the rules. TechCrunch published a long-form feature. He never raised his voice, but everyone heard him. But Elias never commented. Because legacy, to him, wasn't what people said after you left the room. It was how the room functioned when you weren't there. By the end of the quarter, 300 organizations had adopted ClearCode. The FAA opened an inquiry into digital exclusion patterns across multiple airlines. 3 major tech conferences updated their speaker selection processes and issued backdated public apologies to founders they'd once ignored. And quietly, without ceremony, Sequoia Summit's original event contractor parted ways with its top vendor, citing failure to uphold inclusive access protocols. Carly Bradford? She resigned, but not out of guilt. Out of purpose. She now led an independent training collective that worked with corporate gatekeepers across the U.S., teaching them how to see before they're told. She called it Front Desk Forward. Her first client was the hotel where Elias had once been turned away. But the most lasting change didn't come in tech headlines or investor memos. It came in schools. Natalie and Elias launched a pilot education program called Flight Plan, introducing high school students to the intersections of ethics, AI, and access. The first school was in Baton Rouge, the second in Detroit, the third in a small district in Albuquerque where a student named Noah, age 14, stood up after a lesson and asked, "If bias can be coded in, can we code it out?" Elias happened to be in the back of the room that day. He smiled, stepped forward, and said, "We just did." That night, as the sun sank below the hill outside his home, Elias stepped onto the balcony and looked out over the city. No cameras, no tweets, just stillness. He thought of Mavis, of Jaden, of Natalie. of the janitor from New Jersey, now a lead developer at Neurostratus Labs. He thought of the hallway, the cold tea, the folded napkin. Some rooms weren't built for you to be seen, only to be changed by your presence. He whispered it once aloud, not for anyone else to hear, just for the room he had built, the room that now bore his name. Sometimes the most powerful changes don't come from loud voices or sweeping gestures. They come from the quiet strength of someone who refuses to disappear, even when the world tries to turn away. Elias Monroe didn't push back with anger. He stood still with purpose. And in doing so, he reminded us that dignity doesn't need a spotlight to exist. It simply needs to endure. So, if you've ever been made to feel small in a space you helped build, remember, your presence is not a mistake. It's the very thing that might reshape the room for those who come next. Thank you for listening. If this story spoke to something in you, share it. Pass it on. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next voice, the next truth, the next beginning. We'd love to hear how this story made you feel. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every word. And until next time, remember, some rooms weren't built for you to be seen, only to be changed by your presence. Stay tuned.